It was supposed to be just dinner. The kind of dinner you say yes to because the invitation arrives wrapped in silk language. "Let's celebrate us," Derek had said. And how do you say no to that? A rooftop view private table, imported flowers flown in from somewhere she'd never visit now that she was 7 months pregnant. Marissa Green stood in the elevator of the Skyline Club, watching her reflection in the gold trim. She looked expensive, that was the word. Cream wrap dress, soft waves, a hand resting just beneath her belly, as if instinctively guarding the life inside. She had learned to dress for rooms built by men like Derek. Quiet elegance. No shine too loud, no edge too sharp. Behind the gloss, though, was a silence that had started months ago and never really left. The hostess led her to a table for two under a chandelier that resembled hanging glass vines. "Your husband will be joining you shortly," she said with a smile too polished to be real. Marissa thanked her and sat down. The view was perfect, just enough sunset bleeding through the skyline to make it feel romantic. She adjusted the napkin in her lap and ignored the buzz in her chest. This wasn't nerves. Not exactly. It was something colder. Derek had been different lately. Not cruel. Not distant in the obvious ways. Just misaligned. His presence came in shifts, like he was still showing up, but for a version of her he hadn't bothered to update. He used to love asking about her design work, what color schemes were trending, what projects she was excited about. Lately he just nodded. She'd bring up crib designs or baby names, and he'd answer like she was asking about a spreadsheet. Detached, polite, present in form, not in spirit. The waiter poured sparkling water into her glass. She reached for it with one hand and her phone with the other. Still no text. He was late. Of course he was. She tucked her phone away and looked around. Other couples were deep in conversation or laughter, the kind of laughter that says we still see each other. She envied it more than she wanted to admit. Then movement. Across the room, the elevator doors opened. She caught a glimpse of Derek's sharp-cut charcoal suit before he stepped into full view. He was alone. She smiled gently, hoping it didn't look as forced as it felt. He kissed her cheek barely and slid into his seat. "Sorry I'm late." "Traffic," he said, loosening his tie as if the 10-minute delay had cost him oxygen. She didn't ask which traffic or what route. It didn't matter. She'd already stopped keeping track of his excuses. Instead, she reached for her menu. "So, what are we celebrating?" Derek shrugged. "You. Us. Everything. I thought we deserved a night out." Marissa raised an eyebrow, but nodded. The silence between them stretched thin but taut. She tried. "The nursery's almost ready. I picked the softer gray for the walls. Thought it'd help with the light." "That's good," he said, glancing at his phone as it lit up face down on the table. "Less stimulation for the babies." She swallowed. "I was thinking Julian for a name. If one's a boy." His jaw tightened just slightly. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Before she could respond, a sudden hush fell over the room. A change in air. Like every conversation hit pause at the same moment. And then she saw her. Tall, confident, walking like she belonged in every space that made others small. Red dress. Heels that didn't whisper, they announced. Vanessa Pratt. Marissa had met her once, briefly, at a charity event. A lifestyle consultant with perfect teeth and a laugh that sounded rehearsed. Only this time, Vanessa wasn't laughing. She was walking straight toward their table. Marissa didn't move. Her hand gripped the base of her glass as her breath stopped somewhere in the center of her chest. Derek stood up too fast, too natural, and then it happened. Vanessa placed one hand on his chest, the other on his jaw, and kissed him. Not rushed, not hidden, not shy, A deliberate, full you belong to me kiss. Gasps swept the room like falling dominoes. Marissa felt the eyes before she even registered the heat behind her ears. Time slowed. Silverware stilled. Somewhere a server froze mid-pour, but she didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She blinked once, twice, and smiled. The kind of smile you wear when your soul decides it won't beg for dignity. Derek looked at her, then really looked, and for a second he looked afraid. "Marissa," he said, voice low, reaching toward her. She tilted her head. "How long?" The question landed like glass on granite. Vanessa straightened. "Since Aspen," she said casually. "But I think he's wanted out for a while." Marissa turned to Derek. He couldn't meet her eyes. She nodded once. "Okay." He frowned. "Okay." She stood slowly, adjusted her dress, smoothed a wrinkle near her belly. "I'm going to the ladies' room," she said, calm as silk. "By the time I come back, I suggest you both be gone." Derek opened his mouth. Vanessa looked amused. Marissa looked at no one. She turned, walked past the staring faces, the stilled forks, the judgment hiding behind napkins. Her heels clicked softly on the polished floor. She didn't hurry. Inside the restroom, she locked the door, pressed her back against the wall, and breathed. Just once. Then she took out her phone and tapped a contact she hadn't called in months. "Aubrey, it's Marissa," she said, steady and clear. "We're going forward. I want everything in motion by tomorrow." A pause. "Yes," she added. "That includes the house." She ended the call, looked in the mirror, and smiled again. This time not because she had to, but because the exit had already begun. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Marissa didn't cry on the drive home. She didn't scream or curse or break the silence in the Tesla with anything but the occasional exhale. The city lights slid past her windshield like moving stars, and she focused on the road like it was a tunnel leading somewhere safer. Somewhere that didn't echo with applause from strangers who watched her humiliation unfold like dinner theater. Her phone lit up in the cup holder. Derek 3 missed calls. She turned it face down. The house sat still when she arrived, lit softly, like it had been waiting to offer her some version of calm. She stepped through the front door and shut it gently behind her. She didn't turn on the overhead lights, just the small lamp in the entryway, the one with the navy shade she picked up at a flea market in Savannah back when she still believed homes were built on shared taste. She slipped off her shoes and moved quietly, not because she was afraid of waking someone, but because silence had become her armor, a kind of gentle defiance. She headed for the kitchen, pulled open the fridge, and stood there for a moment, letting the cool air touch her skin. No hunger, no craving, just emptiness disguised as composure. Her hand hovered over the lemonade pitcher, then dropped. Instead, she walked to the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, and finally let herself feel something. Not sorrow, not rage, clarity. She reached for the throw blanket folded neatly over the armrest. Grams had knit it during her last good year, pale blue with little waves in the stitching. Marissa pulled it around her shoulders, then stared out the window at the stillness beyond. The baby kicked soft, but insistent. "I know," she whispered, hand on her belly. That was a lot. Another kick, a pause, then another. It felt like agreement. Her phone buzzed again. "Celia, are you okay? I had a dream. Woke up sweating. Call me." She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she opened a drawer in the built-in beside the fireplace, pulled out a manila folder. Inside, copies of wire transfers, scanned emails, her own notes from meetings she'd taken with Derek, back when he still invited her into his professional world. The name on the folder for later. Later had come early. She placed it on the coffee table. Next to it, she added her notebook. The one with the tabs. The one she hadn't let Derek see in months. Then she took her phone and tapped out a new message. To Tony Delgado, "Hi, it's Marissa. If I needed the house appraised, like yesterday, would you be able to stop by?" She hesitated, then hit send. Seconds passed. Tony. "You okay, Marissa? No. But I'm ready." There was a pause. Then the typing bubbles reappeared. "Tony, I'll be there first thing in the morning." She stared at the screen, lips pressed together. Tony had helped them renovate the house 2 years ago. Honest, straightforward, maybe too sentimental for someone in construction. He treated wood like history tile, like memory. She respected that. Trusted it. She didn't want to explain herself. Not yet. But she needed movement, something real. By the time she crawled into bed, it was nearly 2 a.m. Derek wasn't home. She didn't care. Morning came in quiet layers, light filtering through sheer curtains, the soft hum of the neighborhood waking up, a cardinal tapping against the window like it had business with her directly. Marissa made tea. Peppermint. She added honey stirred slowly and sat by the bay window with the cup in both hands like she was grounding herself to the earth. At 9:12 a.m., the doorbell rang. Tony stood on the porch in jeans work boots and a clean polo. He held a clipboard in one hand, a rolled-up measuring tape in the other. She opened the door and stepped back. "I'm guessing this isn't for Zillow fun," he said. "Nope," she replied. "Come in." He hesitated. "Do I ask or—" She nodded once. "He humiliated me. Publicly. She kissed him. In front of me. At dinner." Tony's expression didn't change, but something in his jaw set. "I don't want to fight him," she said. "I want to outthink him. Quietly, completely." He gave a small nod. "Then we'll start in the foyer." For the next hour, he walked through the house, taking notes, measuring, asking questions. Marissa followed, explaining custom finishes, pointing out upgrades. She had overseen materials she had sourced. "Truth is," Tony said as he examined the kitchen backsplash, "you added more value to this house than he did with the whole mortgage." She gave a soft laugh. "He told me it was just paperwork, that putting it in his name would be easier for taxes." Tony looked at her. Not with pity, with something steadier. That line's been used since mortgages were drawn up in pencil. She turned away. "I knew. Deep down, I knew." He didn't press, just said, "You're doing the right thing. No one has to see the storm, but they will see what you built." That landed. By the time Tony left, she had a copy of the estimate. Higher than she expected. The market was shifting, but her designs were still pulling weight. The nursery alone was enough to make buyers pause, dream, say, "I see my family here." She sat at the kitchen island, staring at the numbers. It wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof that she had made something beautiful, something lasting. And if she let go of it now, it wouldn't be a loss. It would be a choice. Her phone lit up again. "Celia, I'm coming over. Don't argue. I'm already 10 minutes away." Marissa smiled. When Celia walked in, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. She wrapped her arms around her sister gently and whispered, "I saw it coming. I just prayed I was wrong." Marissa pulled back, looked at her. "You weren't. But I'm not falling apart, Celia. I can see that. You look dangerous." Marissa raised an eyebrow. "In what way?" "In the way a woman looks when she's done crying and starts organizing." She let that settle. "I'm going to sell the house," Marissa said. Celia sat down. "Good. What else? I've already called Aubrey. And I have someone at the SEC looking into some things." Celia blinked. You're not just leaving him. Marissa's voice was low. Calm. I'm taking everything I built with me. The baby kicked again, harder this time. And for the first time in a long time, Marissa smiled with her whole face. I think he agrees. Marissa hadn't stepped into Derek's office in over 4 months, not since the day she caught him deleting a thread of messages before setting his phone down, face down always. She had pretended not to notice then, pretended it wasn't the 3rd time that week. Now standing in that office again with the scent of his cologne faint on the leather chair and the blinds half drawn like always, she let the door close behind her and breathed in the truth. This room wasn't hers. Never had been. It was designed for power dark wood glass trophies, a liquor cart with selections Marissa never touched. But it was missing something. Warmth, honesty, the quiet that lets you rest. She didn't come here to feel nostalgic. She came for paperwork. Marissa sat at his desk and opened the drawer he always locked when he traveled. The key had once lived in the pocket of his 2nd suit, the one she sent to the cleaners every Thursday. Some habits are hard to erase. She slid the folder out. Inside, bank statements, emails, printouts of wire transfers, investor memos. Her name wasn't on any of them, but her influence was. In the margins, she found her handwriting. Old notes. Ideas she had pitched when Derek was just beginning to build his fund. When they were still sharing ramen after long nights dreaming about houses with wraparound porches and Sunday mornings that smelled like cinnamon and sunlight. She skimmed a memo titled, Q4 Expansion Proposal. And there it was, the pitch she had drafted. Word for word. No credit, no mention. Just his logo on the top typed clean and bold Langford Equity Partners. Her throat tightened. It wasn't about ego, it was about erasure. She copied the file to her flash drive, then shut everything down the way she found it. Clean, silent, like she had never been there. Back in her own studio, the one she had designed from scratch in a converted carriage house behind the main house, she laid everything out on the drafting table. A wall of notes, folders, contracts, email printouts. She stared at it all and whispered, "Now we begin." Her phone buzzed. Aubrey Ennie updates Marissa. A full trail. I'll bring it to the meeting. Aubrey good. Don't underestimate how fast he'll move when he realizes what you're doing. Marissa, I'm already ahead. She put the phone down and turned toward her design board. At the center was her biggest upcoming project, Greenleaf Residences, a luxury apartment complex she was set to style. It was her first solo developer deal. One Derek didn't know about, one she had negotiated alone. She reached for a sample swatch, then paused. The doorbell rang. Not Celia. Not Tony. Marissa walked to the front door and checked the monitor. Vanessa. Standing on her porch, arms folded, sunglasses perched high like this was some kind of casual errand, Marissa's fingers hovered over the intercom. She could ignore it. She could call Aubrey. But instead she pressed the speaker button. Yes, Vanessa didn't flinch. I think we should talk. There's nothing left to discuss. Then you won't mind if I say it out loud. Marissa's silence held. Vanessa continued. I didn't know you were pregnant. Not at first. Marissa let out a quiet, humorless breath. You walked into a dinner and kissed my husband in front of me. Forgive me if I don't believe you were lacking details. Vanessa shifted her weight. You think I'm just the villain in this. I get it. But you don't know him. Not like I do. That did it. Marissa opened the door. Only halfway. Vanessa looked surprised, maybe even a little impressed. Marissa leaned against the frame. You came all the way here to convince me you're different. No, Vanessa said quieter now. I came because you're not. Different, I mean. You think you are, but you're not. We all fall for men who promise things and say the right words and build lives on our backs while telling us it's a partnership. Marissa didn't blink. Vanessa's voice wavered slightly. He told me he was going to leave you, that you were holding him back. Marissa raised her chin. He said the same about his firm, that regulations were holding him back. Funny how anything that keeps him honest is an inconvenience. Vanessa swallowed. You have no idea how hard it is to start over when someone you trusted lies to your face. Marissa's eyes darkened. Actually, I do. You just chose to be on the wrong side of that lesson. Vanessa took a step back. Marissa added, If you think you're special, I hope you've saved proof. I hope you've kept copies, because once he gets what he wants, there's no velvet goodbye. Just silence. She closed the door. Gently. Then turned hand pressed over her stomach. The baby kicked again, like it was reminding her stay upright. Stay moving. She returned to the studio and picked up her phone. Marissa to Aubrey add, Vanessa to the deposition list. She might be useful later. Aubrey's response came fast. Smart. Anything else? I want the house on the market by the end of the week. We'll need to clean the deed trail. I'm ready. He doesn't know it yet. But this house is already gone. Marissa looked around the space. The light pouring in from the side windows. The sketches pinned to the wall. The chair where she used to sit with Derek and dream about building something real. She would never let herself forget what it cost to keep loving someone who mistook your loyalty for convenience. Not again. This time she'd walk first. And when she did, she wouldn't just leave the house. She'd leave with the blueprints. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Marissa stood alone in the nursery as morning light spilled through the wide windows, painting soft shadows over the walls she had once coated with hope. The paint color was feather gray. She'd picked it during their second trimester when Derek still touched her stomach without flinching. When he still said things like, "Our son will be bold like you, grounded like me." Now she wondered if he ever meant it, or if those words were just rehearsals for the next woman. She ran her hand gently along the edge of the crib. The mattress was still in its packaging. The mobile above it hadn't been hung yet. There was time. But not much. Her phone vibrated on the windowsill. Aubrey. Everything's in place. Contracts updated. Legal notices prepped. You sure you want the listing to go live tomorrow? Marissa stared at the text for a long second, then typed, yes. Schedule the photographer. I want the house online before he lands in Atlanta. She hit send heart steady. The house was more than just property. It was a monument. Every room bore her fingerprints, every fixture her design, and yet her name didn't live on the deed. Just his. That fact used to sting. Now it fueled her. Behind her, the door creaked open. Celia's voice carried in with that sisterly blend of concern and practicality. He's not going to see this coming. Marissa turned. That's the point. Celia stepped in holding a cardboard box labeled Files, 2020. Her expression was unreadable. You really ready to walk out of this house? I'm not walking, Marissa said gently. I'm relocating the foundation. Celia chuckled under her breath and set the box down. You've got a quote for everything now, huh? Marissa shrugged. Helps me breathe. They stood in silence for a beat. Then Celia lowered herself carefully onto the glider near the window. You know, she said, I used to think strength was about endurance, about staying, working it out. But watching you... Marissa looked over. You're redefining it for me, Celia said. Turns out leaving with your dignity intact is its own kind of power. Marissa smiled faintly. It's not just about leaving, it's about making sure I'm not erased from the life I helped build. Another kick pulsed low in her belly. She winced slightly, placing her hand there. Celia stood again. "Okay, Mama. Time for you to sit. I'll finish packing the files." Marissa obeyed, easing herself onto the edge of the bed in the guest room. Her body was tired, but her mind was sharp, focused. She opened her laptop, logged into her shared folder exit blueprint. Every document was there. Bank statements showing her design income funding, Derek's business account in year 1, screenshots of late-night emails she had edited for him before investor meetings. The original home renovation invoice Tony had signed her name, not Derek's, on the materials budget. And the prenup. Her copy untouched, the signature line for the witnesses. Blank. Aubrey had already confirmed it. Unenforceable. Her phone buzzed again. "Tony just finished staging the exterior. Place looks ready for a magazine shoot. Want me to grab you lunch?" She hesitated before replying. "Something light." "Thank you." Then, almost without thinking, she added, "I really appreciate you, Tony." 3 dots appeared. "Then always got your back. You built this place with more heart than he ever gave it." She swallowed. That response settled somewhere deep in her chest. For a moment, she closed the laptop and stared at her hands. They looked strong today. The doorbell rang downstairs. Celia peeked in. "Photographer's here." Marissa stood and straightened her sweater. "Let's show the world what I designed before I let it go." 2 hours later, the house looked like a memory in a catalog. Soft lighting, open curtains, candles lit but not burning, just staged symbolic. Marissa watched from the top of the stairs as the photographer snapped wide-angle shots of the foyer. His assistant adjusted pillows with surgical precision. Marissa whispered, "Every photo is a receipt." Celia looked up. "You sure you want this to be public? I want the story told the right way," Marissa said. "And the only way to control the story is to write it myself." Outside, wind rustled the trees lining the front yard. And then, just past the iron gate, a black sedan pulled up. Marissa froze. The back door opened and Derek stepped out. She turned sharply to Celia. He wasn't supposed to be back until Friday. Celia checked her phone. That's what his itinerary said. Marissa squared her shoulders. "I'll handle it." She walked down the stairs, slowly feeling every muscle tighten in her legs, her belly, her spine. Derek met her at the bottom of the steps. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing past her to the flash of a camera behind the living room windows. "Why is our house being photographed?" Marissa kept her tone even. "It's being listed." His brows furrowed. "Excuse me, I'm selling the house, Derek." "You're..." He blinked, half laughing. "Are you serious?" She nodded. "You can call Aubrey if you want the paperwork breakdown. I've already signed the documents." He looked stunned. "You don't get to just sell the house, Marissa. It's in my name." She took a step closer. "That's exactly why I'm selling it." He opened his mouth, but she lifted a hand. "I designed this house. I chose every finish. Paid for the nursery remodel. Negotiated the land contract with the seller before you ever signed the mortgage. Don't you dare stand in front of me and act like I'm walking away from something that was ever truly yours." His voice lowered. "This is our home." "No," she said softly. "This was a stage. I just stopped performing." The front door opened behind them. Tony appeared with a takeout bag in one hand and a camera case in the other. He stopped short, reading the tension instantly. "You okay?" he asked her quietly. She nodded once. Derek's eyes narrowed. "Seriously, you're bringing in photographers and contractors now. That's what this is." Marissa didn't take the bait. She turned to Tony, took the bag, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she looked at Derek. "If you wanted loyalty, you should have given it. If you wanted silence, you should have deserved it." She stepped back, the door already closing behind her. and for the first time since the kiss, Derek didn't have a single word to say. He was too busy watching his power slip through a front door he used to walk through without thinking. Now, he had to knock. And Marissa wasn't answering. The drive to her grandmother's house felt longer than it used to. Roads that once felt familiar had shifted under time and silence. Marissa rolled down the window halfway, letting the wind carry in the scent of damp pine and soft clay. The Carolina air was always heavier here, thicker, older, like it knew the weight of the secrets people whispered on their porches. The house sat at the edge of a long gravel path surrounded by pear trees and history, white with navy shutters and a crooked front step that no one ever fixed, because Gloria Greene said, "Things don't need to be perfect to be worth keeping." Marissa parked, killed the engine, and just sat for a second. There was something sacred about this house. Like time slowed down the second you stepped inside. You could still hear Graham's radio humming gospel in the kitchen, the faint clink of glass jars cooling on the counter. She opened the trunk and pulled out the box she'd packed that morning. Inside old photo albums, her grandmother's ledger book and a worn recipe card with ink faded into whispers. She wasn't here to cry. She was here to remember why she couldn't afford to go back. Inside the house was exactly as she'd left it. The smell of lemon balm and cedar. The faint creak of floorboards that told you where you were without a light. She placed the box on the dining table and walked into the kitchen, running her fingers along the edge of the counter Grams had scrubbed 1,000 times over. Then she opened the pantry. Behind the mason jars and biscuit tins, just where she remembered, sat a fireproof lockbox. She pulled it out, placed it on the table, and entered the code. Click. Inside were two things, a folded envelope with her name on it, and the deed to the house paid off, signed in her grandmother's strong cursive. She opened the envelope slowly. The letter inside was dated 3 years ago. "Marissa, if you're reading this, then I figure you're at a crossroads. Maybe something hurt, or maybe something shifted. Either way, I trust you. You've got the kind of strength I never learned to name out loud. You love people fully, and that's a gift. But baby girl, don't let loving someone be the reason you forget how to love yourself." Her hands shook slightly as she read. "This house is yours. Not because I'm gone, but because I knew someday you'd need a place that reminded you who you were before anybody tried to rewrite you. Don't let them take credit for what you built, and don't wait for permission to leave a table you're no longer fed at." Her breath caught. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. Somewhere in the quiet, the baby moved again. "I know," she whispered. "We're getting there." Later, she sat on the porch with sweet tea in one hand and her phone in the other. She called Aubrey first. "I want to move the staging date up," she said. "We don't wait." "We lead," noted Aubrey replied. "I'll adjust the timeline." Then she called Celia. "I'm staying here for a couple of days. You sure I can drive up?" "No. I need to be alone with this next part." Marissa hung up and took a long sip of her tea, watching the wind carry petals from the dogwood tree across the yard like tiny notes left behind by time. The screen door creaked open behind her. She turned. Tony stepped out holding 2 grocery bags. "You didn't think I'd let you do this whole memory lane thing solo, did you?" She blinked. "How did you even know I was here? I saw the route you left in the notebook by your design board. You only ever write down 2 places when your heart's heavy, your grandmother's and the nursery supplier." She shook her head, but didn't argue. He sat beside her, placed 1 bag down, and pulled out a loaf of bread, a jar of honey, and a container of fresh strawberries. "Let me guess," she said. "Graham's jam toast with a side of reality check." She smiled despite herself. They ate in silence for a while. Then Tony said, "You know he's going to try to spin this, right? Make it look like you overreacted." Marissa didn't flinch. Let him try. The numbers tell the story. You're not scared, I am, she admitted. But not of him. I'm scared of the part of me that still waits for an apology that won't come. Tony looked at her for a long moment. Then soft. You know, most people would have burned the house down metaphorically. She met his eyes. I'm not trying to destroy his life. I'm just not going to keep letting him live mine. The breeze picked up again. Tony leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Marissa, when this is all over, what do you want? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a sketchbook, flipped through pages of color swatches, window angles, textile notes, then stopped on one labeled Someday. It was a boutique studio, part co-working space, part gallery. Designed for women like her, builders, visionaries, quiet forces. I want this, she said. A place where women can work without being told to smile first. Tony smiled. Then we'll build it. Her heart pulled tight. She didn't know what that meant or how to answer it, but she knew one thing. This moment right here felt more honest than anything she'd shared with Derek in years. Later, after Tony left, and the porch lights glowed soft and warm against the coming dark, Marissa sat alone again with the letter from Grams in her lap. The baby shifted. She closed her eyes, pressed her hand to her belly, and whispered, "You're not coming into chaos. You're coming into clarity." Tomorrow she would go back and push everything forward. But tonight, she let herself rest. Not as a wife, not even as a mother, just as a woman who had finally remembered who she was. Marissa stepped back into the Charlotte house 2 days later, and it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a project halfway demoed clean surfaces with secrets still buried in the drywall. Celia had been staying there, keeping things moving, sorting what to keep and what to quietly let go. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and purpose. A candle flickered on the island. Marissa paused in the entryway, soaking it in. "You look clearer," Celia said, walking in from the living room with a warm mug. "Like you remembered who you were before all the noise." "I did," Marissa replied. "And I brought her back with me." They shared a smile, quiet and full of things that didn't need to be said. Marissa moved to the breakfast nook where a stack of manila folders waited beside her laptop. She opened the top one, then paused. "You've been sorting," Celia shrugged. "You know me. If I sit still too long, I start alphabetizing emotions." Marissa chuckled. "What did you find?" Celia pointed to one of the folders. "That one. You need to see it." Marissa opened it. Inside were drafts of business contracts Derek had prepared years ago. One in particular stood out, an early funding agreement with a developer she had introduced him to at a design showcase. Her name wasn't anywhere in the official contract, but there in his handwriting at the top margin were the words, "Through Marissa's contact." She stared at it. Proof. Another thread to pull. Another piece of the life she had helped him build, and he tried to keep all to himself. She snapped a picture and emailed it to Aubrey with a subject line that read, "Additional leverage." Celia leaned on the counter. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found out all the time?" Marissa said. "I would have kept building his legacy while mine stayed invisible." "Not anymore." "No," Marissa said softly. "Not anymore." Her phone buzzed. Tony Offer just came in on the house. Full asking. Local buyer. She saw the photos and said she could feel your presence in every room. Marissa stared at the screen for a long moment. A full offer. The first real confirmation that this wasn't just emotional closure. It was financial power. Tangible. Transferable. She typed, "Tell her we accept, and thank her for seeing me in it." A second later, "Tony, she wants to meet you. Says she's opening a women's development fund. Thinks you'd be a great partner." Marissa blinked, then read the text again. Something opened inside her. Not wide. Just enough to breathe deeper. Later that afternoon, Marissa sat in her studio sketching out a design board for the Greenleaf Residences project. She had real momentum now, her own client, her own deal, and now possibly her own capital partner. Every square of fabric she pinned on the board felt like an act of reclamation. Then the door opened, and Celia peeked in a different kind of stillness in her posture. "You have a visitor." Marissa glanced up. Tony. Celia shook her head. "No. Derek." Her body went still. She placed the swatch down and stood slowly. "Did you let him in?" "He's on the porch. I told him you'd decide." Marissa walked to the front of the house. The late afternoon sun spilled across the hardwood. She opened the door just enough to see him. He stood on the porch like a man who didn't recognize the ground under his feet anymore. She stepped outside, closed the door behind her, and folded her arms. "You have 5 minutes." Derek ran a hand down his jaw the same way he always did when he was trying to collect himself. "I didn't come to fight." "Good," she said, "because that wouldn't go well for you." He looked out over the yard, then back at her. "You sold the house." "I did. You didn't even tell me. I didn't need your permission." His lips pressed together, the weight of that truth sinking in. "Do you hate me?" She paused. "No," she said. "I hate what I allowed myself to tolerate in your name." "That's not the same thing." He swallowed. "I made mistakes. I thought I could fix it." "No," she said, voice even. "You thought you could control the fallout. That's not the same as fixing it." He shifted his stance. "I don't want this to get ugly." She stepped forward close enough that he could see the steel in her spine. "It won't. Because I'm not here for revenge, Derek. I'm here for justice. You built your name on my ideas, my connections, my sacrifice. Now I'm putting my name on what I built." His eyes flickered. "Vanessa's not pregnant." Marissa's jaw tightened. She said nothing. She lied. Said she thought it would give us a fresh start. Marissa asked calmly. "Or both of you?" He didn't answer. "I'm not the woman you gaslight into staying anymore," she said. "I'm the woman who walks out and takes the light with her." He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time, and maybe he was. She opened the door behind her. "Don't come here again without a lawyer," she said, and she closed it gently with finality. Back in the studio, Celia was waiting with a raised brow. "How'd it go?" "It didn't," Marissa replied. "And it won't." She moved to her board and added a note next to her latest sketch, built without apology. Then she whispered to herself, "This time it's all mine." Marissa didn't sleep that night. Not because of nerves those had quieted, not because of fear that had already burned off. What kept her awake was the weight of what next. The space between the decision and the delivery. The knowing without the arrival. She stood by the window of her temporary guest suite, sipping warm milk with honey, watching the house she was about to leave behind glow faintly in the moonlight. The house was technically still hers until closing, but emotionally, it had already shifted. It no longer felt like a home. It felt like a file in a court case, a documented chapter she had fully edited. The sale would finalize in 3 days. She'd signed the contract that afternoon with Aubrey by her side. Tony had handled the final walkthrough with the buyer. Everything was moving forward, smooth, strategic, just like she planned. And yet, there was something about watching the familiar outline of the porch swing swaying in the breeze that still pulled at her. The twins were supposed to grow up here, play in that yard, take their first steps across the living room. Marissa had poured herself into plank by plank. She inhaled deep and slow, pressing one hand over her stomach. The baby kicked again. They knew something was changing. So did she. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. "Tony, tomorrow's inspection is confirmed. I'll be there by 9. Bringing coffee your usual?" She smiled faintly, fingers hovering. "Yes. And thanks. For everything." His reply came faster than she expected. "You're building your next life. Least I can do is carry the lumber." She read it twice. Then once more, slower. The moonlight caught the edges of the phone screen, and for the first time since everything began unraveling, she didn't feel so alone. The next morning, Marissa sat in the now empty living room while the inspector walked through the house with a clipboard and quiet footsteps. Tony leaned against the doorframe, sipping his coffee, watching her like he was waiting for something she hadn't said yet. "You good?" he finally asked. Marissa nodded but didn't look up. "It's surreal." He took a slow sip. "Letting go always is." She traced her finger along the edge of the mantel. "I thought I'd feel victorious by now. Like I imagined this moment would feel sharp, final. But it's not. It's soft." "That's not weakness," Tony said. "That's grace. You're not burning the house down. You're releasing it." She finally looked up at him. "You always talk like you read self-help books in secret." He smiled. "Only the ones with pictures of cabins on the covers." They laughed, just for a moment. Then quiet settled in again, gentle but present. Tony stepped closer. "You know, I remember when you were picking tile for the upstairs bathroom. You stood in that store for over an hour, holding up samples to the light like you were choosing a future, not a floor." She said. "I wanted every part of this house to reflect a life I believed in." Tony's gaze softened. "And now you're choosing a different life, one that reflects you." Something in her chest shifted, a warmth she hadn't made room for yet. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the inspector came back in, breaking the moment. "All clear," he said. "This place is solid. Whoever's moving in is lucky." Marissa stood. "Thank you." He nodded and left. Tony lingered. Marissa walked him to the door, but before she opened it, she paused. "There's something I need to ask," she said. He turned. "Anything." "Why have you stayed?" she asked softly. Through all this, Tony held her gaze. "Because I knew you before this house, before Derek, and I knew the woman you were wasn't lost, just buried." Her breath caught. "I saw you before he dimmed you," he added. "I just didn't know how to say it. You're saying it now. I should have said it earlier," he said, "but I'll keep showing up if you'll let me." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened the door and stepped out into the warm sun. He followed. They stood on the porch, the breeze soft, the trees rustling with just enough rhythm to feel like the world was nodding along. "Lunch?" he asked. She looked at him. "Not yet." His smile faltered, but she shook her head gently. Not yet. I need to finish this chapter before I start another." Tony nodded, stepping back. "I'll wait." "I'm not asking you to," she said. "But I won't forget you did." He gave her a look that held no pressure, only clarity. "Take your time," he said. "Just don't take your light from yourself again." And then he left just like that, with no agenda, no lingering glance, just the quiet confidence of a man who understood timing mattered. Later that evening, Marissa stood in the center of the bedroom one last time. The walls were bare. The air held the echo of everything she'd once dreamed here. She whispered into the quiet. "Thank you. Not to Derek. To herself. For waking up. For walking away. For rebuilding in silence." She turned off the light, closed the door, and didn't look back. The house was ready for its new owner, and so was she. Marissa sat at the long marble table inside the co-working space downtown, her laptop open coffee cooling beside her. Her sketchpad was spread out in front of her full of annotations, arrows, swatches, and post-its scribbled with timelines. The sun poured through the tall windows, and the buzz of muted conversations filled the air like background music. Women in tailored blazers and bold lipstick moved with intention all around her. It didn't feel like survival here. It felt like strategy, and that mattered. Aubrey dropped into the chair across from her with 2 folders and an arched brow. "You look like someone who hasn't blinked in an hour." "I might not have," Marissa said, rubbing her eyes. "I'm finalizing the Greenleaf model home palette. The install team needs the board signed off by Friday, and I still haven't settled on the living room scheme." Aubrey slid a 3rd folder across the table. "Then you'll love this distraction. That investor I told you about, she's requesting a meeting with you. Said your story resonated, and she's tired of funding male-run firms that ignore design." Marissa's hand hovered over the folder. "She's legit?" she asked. Aubrey nodded. "Built her company from the ground up. Started in real estate flipping, now runs one of the largest women-owned funds on the East Coast." Marissa opened the folder. Inside a profile photo of a woman in her 50s, dark curls, eyes like they didn't miss anything, and a sharp smile. "Catherine Bellamy. She's in town for one more day," Aubrey said. "Wants coffee at 4. Marissa glanced at the time. 2:03 p.m. She closed her laptop. "Send me the location." Aubrey tilted her head, smiling. "You ready for this?" "No," Marissa said. "But I'm going anyway." The cafe was tucked inside a converted train station, brick walls, velvet booths, gold light fixtures overhead like upside-down tulips. Catherine Bellamy sat in a corner booth, sipping from a porcelain teacup, like it was part of a ritual. Marissa approached shoulders back, nerves kept neatly in check. "Miss Bellamy," she said, extending a hand. Catherine stood and shook it. "Call me Catherine." "Please. I've read all about you. Now I want to hear from you." Marissa sat across from her. "You've built a name quickly," Catherine said. "I admire that, especially when it's built from the ashes of something someone else tried to take credit for." Marissa didn't flinch. "I didn't burn anything down. I just refused to keep sweeping the smoke under the rug." Catherine's eyes sparkled. "Good. That's the kind of clarity I'm looking to invest in." They spoke for over an hour. Design philosophy, ownership, the silent tax of being a woman in a room where your voice has to sound like certainty just to be heard as a suggestion. Marissa didn't pitch. She spoke. Catherine listened. At the end of the conversation, Catherine closed her leather notebook. "You're not just talented," she said. "You're prepared. Most people don't understand the difference." Marissa tried to keep her voice steady. "Does that mean you're interested?" Catherine smiled. "Let's take the next step. I want to fund your studio concept. Full backing. I'll send terms to your attorney tomorrow." Marissa blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Catherine said. "Women like us don't need to be convinced. We just need to be seen." Back in her car, Marissa sat with both hands on the steering wheel, not driving, not calling, just breathing. It was happening. Her own studio, her own name, her own clients, her own checkbook. Everything she used to believe she needed permission for was now hers to claim. She looked out the windshield and whispered, "I hope you see this, Grams." A soft knock on the driver's side window startled her. "Tony." She rolled it down, half smiling. "How do you always appear like you've got a tracking chip on me?" He held up a paper bag. "Celia said you missed lunch again." She took it, amused. "You're really leaning into the caretaker role. I like feeding people who forget to eat when they win." Marissa stared at him for a second. What do you mean? Tony nodded at her expression. You look like someone who just heard yes after years of almost. She exhaled. Catherine Bellamy's funding my studio. Tony didn't react with surprise. He just smiled. Then I was right to bring lunch, he said. Today needs a moment. He leaned against the side of the car. Marissa watched him. There was something steady in his presence. Not flashy, not loud, just loyal. The kind of energy you don't recognize when your life is loud, but that you crave once the noise falls away. You don't want anything from me, do you? She asked quietly. He looked over. Just to see you stop shrinking around people who only clap when they're holding the spotlight. Her eyes watered unexpectedly. She looked down at the bag in her hands, then back up. Thank you, she whispered. Tony reached out, brushing a hair from her face with the gentlest touch. I'm not waiting on you, he said, but I'm here. Whenever you're ready. Then he walked away, and Marissa stayed in the car, heart fuller than it had been in months. Mind racing, not with worry, but with possibility. She wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. The studio keys felt heavier in Marissa's hand than she expected. Not in weight, but in meaning. She stood outside the building, an airy brick structure with steel-framed windows and ivy curling up the side, knowing this was more than just a lease. It was a declaration. Her name was etched on the glass door in soft gold script. Marissa Green Studio. No shared last name. No partnership line underneath. Just hers. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The scent of fresh paint and open ambition greeted her. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the exposed beams and polished concrete floors. Everything was still unfinished, just the bones, but to her, it felt complete. Like the first deep breath after holding it far too long. A few minutes later, Celia arrived, juggling a bouquet of eucalyptus and hydrangeas with one hand and a bag of pastries in the other. For the queen of clean slates, she said, placing the flowers on the center table. Marissa laughed softly, hugging her. You never miss a moment. I don't let people I love forget their own milestones, Celia said, especially when they're too focused on what's next. They stood together, staring at the empty space around them. You gonna tell him? Celia asked gently. Marissa didn't need her to clarify. She meant Tony. I don't know, she said. It feels like everything is just starting to click. And I'm afraid... Celia raised an eyebrow. Afraid of what? That he might become something I lean on instead of something I stand beside? Celia stepped closer. You think he wants to be a crutch? No, Marissa admitted. I think he wants to be a partner. And I don't know how to be in something without losing parts of myself anymore. Celia didn't respond right away. Then she said, maybe the goal isn't to stay untouched. Maybe it's to let the right person touch the parts that remind you who you are. Marissa blinked at her, caught between resistance and realization. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Aubrey, she answered, putting it on speaker. You're going to want to sit down, Aubrey said. The firm representing Derek just emailed me. Marissa's stomach didn't drop. Not anymore. Now it simply braced. What is it? He's requesting a meeting. Not through lawyers? In person. Marissa closed her eyes for a beat. What does he want, they wouldn't say. But I did some digging. His company's being audited. And the SEC opened a preliminary investigation. The fund you helped build, he's been moving assets around. Celia let out a low whistle. That man never learns. Marissa's voice was steady. Set the meeting. But it's on my terms. Aubrey hesitated. You sure I'm not afraid of him anymore? Marissa said. He can show up. But I'm the one at the table now. The meeting was set for Friday. Neutral location. A private office space, downtown, neutral furniture glass walls, nothing to hold on to. Marissa chose it deliberately. No softness, no nostalgia. That night she sat on the floor of the studio laptop, open, reviewing every document she had archived over the years. She wasn't looking for revenge. She was looking for leverage, clarity, truth. Tony arrived around 8, carrying Thai food, and that familiar calm she was starting to rely on more than she'd admit. "You eat today?" he asked. Marissa gestured at the uneaten granola bar on the table. "Does that count?" Tony handed her a container. "No. This does." They sat across from each other, cross-legged on the concrete floor, lights, low steam rising from their takeout. He watched her for a long moment. "You look like you're carrying 10 lives." "I am," she said softly. "You ever going to let someone carry one of them with you?" She didn't answer right away. "Tony, I don't know how to be with someone who doesn't need saving but also won't try to save me." He leaned forward. "I'm not here to save you. I'm here to support you. There's a difference." Marissa stared at him, unsure of whether to cry or kiss him or retreat completely. Instead, she asked, "What do you see when you look at me now?" Tony didn't blink. "I see a woman who's rebuilding not because she has to, but because she finally wants to. I see someone who's not afraid of starting over. Someone who knows her worth without needing a mirror." Marissa exhaled, shaky and slow. Then she reached across and took his hand. "I'm not ready," she said. "But I'm not running." Tony nodded, tightening his fingers around hers. "That's all I needed to hear." They sat there in silence, palms-joined dreams hovering in the air like warm fog. No promises, no pressure, just presence. And for now, that was more than enough. The air in the office suite was too still. Marissa adjusted the sleeve of her blazer and glanced at the clock on the wall, 10:57 a.m. The meeting with Derek was scheduled for 11. She'd arrived early, rehearsed every answer in her head, and reviewed every document Aubrey had flagged. But none of that calmed the low hum in her chest. This wasn't fear. It was a strange sort of grief. The kind that settles in when you're about to watch someone you once loved explain why they buried the knife. Celia had offered to come. Tony had insisted on waiting downstairs with a coffee he swore she'd forget to finish. Marissa had said no to both. This chapter she would turn alone. At precisely 11:00 a.m., the elevator chimed. Footsteps. Then the door opened, and Derek stepped in polished as ever. Charcoal suit, pocket square, expensive watch that glinted when he adjusted his cuff. The same charm, but dulled at the edges now. He looked like a man trying to wear his past as a shield. Marissa didn't rise. "Derek," she said evenly. He closed the door behind him. "Marissa. You look like you've moved on." "I have." He exhaled, pacing once, then sat across from her at the table. "No lawyer?" she asked. "No need," he replied. "I'm not here to fight you." "Good," she said, folding her hands. "Because if you were, you'd already be losing." Derek gave a strained laugh. "I always did underestimate you." "No," Marissa corrected. "You saw me. You just thought I'd stay quiet." A beat of silence stretched between them. He finally spoke. "I made mistakes. I know that. I let the money, the image, the pressure control too much." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't let the pressure do anything. You chose. And then you lied." Repeatedly. His jaw twitched. "I didn't know how to be with someone who made me feel that exposed." "That's not vulnerability, Derek," she said. "That's fear dressed up as pride. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a prop." He leaned forward. "I came today to make things right." "No," Marissa said, her voice clear and unwavering. "You came today because you're cornered. The SEC's involved, your fund is unraveling, and the one person who made your empire look clean walked away. He didn't deny it. I never thought you'd go public with what you knew he said. I haven't. Yet. The air shifted. Derek swallowed hard. What do you want? Marissa opened her portfolio and slid a folder across the table. A list of assets, transactions, email threads where his assistant had forwarded confidential documents Marissa had helped draft years ago. This isn't a threat, she said. It's clarity. I know what you did. I know what I contributed. And I have the documentation to back it up. So here's what's going to happen. She leaned in. You will release your claim to the last joint fund. You will not interfere with the Greenleaf project. And you will sign over the final property interest from our shared trust quietly. No press, no posturing. And if I don't, Marissa didn't blink. Then Catherine Bellamy, who, by the way, is now my partner, will be very interested in turning this entire situation into a cautionary tale for every investor on the eastern seaboard. Derek sat back, stunned. You're bluffing. She tilted her head. Do I look like someone bluffing? He stared at her, the realization settling like dust. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. And worse, she was better without him. Finally, he nodded, slowly, defeated. Send over the paperwork. I already have, she said. Check your inbox. He stood but paused at the door. Did you ever love me? She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, she said. But I spent too long mistaking control for care. I loved you. But I love myself more now. He didn't reply. He just nodded once and left. Marissa sat in the silence that followed, letting the weight of it settle. It wasn't triumph. It was truth. Later that afternoon, she met Tony back at the studio. He was on a ladder hanging pendant lights over the front lobby. How'd it go? He asked, not turning around. He surrendered, she said simply. Tony glanced over his shoulder. You expected him to? No, she said. But I was prepared when he did. Tony climbed down, wiped his hands on a cloth, and looked at her. You okay? Marissa nodded slowly. I'm tired, but I feel clean. Like something heavy finally left the room. Tony handed her a small, folded piece of paper. This came in with the delivery this morning. She unfolded it. Inside was a sketch she'd made months ago, one she'd thought was lost. A soft pencil drawing of a space filled with women working, laughing, standing tall. Her dream studio. On the bottom, in her handwriting, for the day I finally come home to myself. Marissa blinked back tears. Tony touched her shoulder. You built this. All of it. She looked around the room, the clean walls, the warm light, the open space. No, she whispered. I earned it. She placed the sketch in the center of her desk, hands trembling just slightly. Tomorrow the studio would open its doors for the first time. But tonight she would stand here in the quiet she created and let it fill every part of her she once thought she'd lost. The studio opened quietly. No ribbon cutting, no champagne, no curated Instagram reel. Just a handwritten sign taped to the door that read, We're here. We're ready. Come in. Marissa stood by the front window, one hand resting on her stomach, watching the first sunlight pour through the space. The hardwood floors glowed honey gold beneath her shoes. In the distance, she could hear Celia in the back organizing files and laughing softly on the phone with one of the new interns. Aubrey was prepping the contracts for their next design client, a boutique hotel renovation in Charleston. Everything she'd planned, fought for, and almost walked away from, was finally in motion. And yet beneath the surface there was something unsettled. The past had ended, but the future hadn't quite introduced itself yet. Tony arrived with coffee as he always did, carrying 2 cups, and that slow, quiet smile that grounded her more than she liked to admit. You slept? He asked, handing her the cup. She nodded. Sort of. He looked at her carefully. Sort of. Marissa sipped, then exhaled. I think I'm realizing that even good change is heavy. Tony leaned against the wall beside her. You want to go somewhere just for a few hours? Clear your head. She tilted her head. Where? He smiled. Come on. The drive took an hour. Out of Charlotte, past the buzz of business centers and high-rises, through winding roads framed by trees starting to blush with early autumn. They pulled into a wide gravel lot overlooking Lake Norman. Quiet. Crisp. The kind of place where you remembered how big the sky could feel. Tony stepped out first, circling to open her door. Marissa let the wind rush over her as she got out the scent of pine and earth grounding her. I used to come here when I needed answers, Tony said, walking with her down to the shoreline. Or peace. Or both. They sat on a weathered bench that faced the water. The lake stretched out wide and still catching the sky like a mirror. Marissa stared at the water. I don't know how to stop looking back, she admitted. Even now, even after all this progress. Tony didn't interrupt. I keep thinking about all the times I should have left, the things I let slide, the silence I swallowed. I thought I was staying for love, but I was really staying for the idea of what love was supposed to be. She rubbed her arms. The breeze picked up. Tony was still quiet. Then he said, You ever think maybe you needed to go through all of that, to become the version of yourself who knows better now? She looked at him, her eyes glassy. I hate that I had to break to learn how to build. Tony nodded slowly. Yeah, but now you're building something no one can take. She wiped at her cheek. You always say the right thing. No, he said softly. I just say the things no one else stayed long enough to see mattered. They sat in silence again. And then Marissa did something she hadn't done in years. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded letter. Worn. Soft at the edges. I wrote this the day I found out, she said. About Vanessa. About the betrayal. She held it out to him. Tony hesitated. Are you sure I need someone to hold this story who won't use it against me? She whispered. And I trust you. He unfolded it and read quietly. The wind moved around them like breath. When he finished, he held the letter in his lap, staring out at the lake. This, he said, voice thick, is not just grief. It's wisdom. Marissa let the wind dry her tears. I couldn't read it again, she said, but I couldn't throw it away either. Tony carefully folded the letter and tucked it into the pocket of his jacket. Not to keep, just to carry. I'll hold it, he said, until you're ready to write the next one. They sat like that, side by side, as the sun climbed higher and the lake shimmered with light. Then softly she asked, Do you ever wish we'd met before all this? Tony glanced at her. No, he said, because then I wouldn't have known how strong you really are. She turned to him, surprised. I don't want the version of you that needed saving, he said. I want the woman who saved herself and still had room to love. Her heart tightened. In a good way. In a way that made space instead of stealing it. She didn't respond. She just leaned her head on his shoulder, the lake still and endless before them. For the first time, she felt something unfamiliar. Not closure, but beginning. The sound of voices echoed through the studio lobby as Marissa stepped out of her office heels, clicking across polished concrete. Aubrey stood near the entrance, laughing with a group of interns, while Celia placed a vase of fresh flowers near the reception desk. Light filtered in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden streaks across the room. It looked like everything was thriving. But in Marissa's chest, a quiet unease stirred. She moved with poise, answering questions, approving design boards, offering notes. Yet all morning, a feeling sat at the base of her ribs, an intuition. Not fear, not dread. Just a sense that something was shifting, and she needed to be ready for it. She was still thinking about it when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voicemail. She stared at the screen, then played it on speaker as she walked into her office. A woman's voice filled the room, low, clipped, polished. "Hi, Marissa, this is Vanessa. I'm sure my name is one you didn't expect to hear again. I know we're not friends, and I'm not looking for redemption, but you deserve to know what Derek's trying to do behind the scenes. There are things you haven't seen yet. And you need to. Call me, please." Marissa stood perfectly still, the phone screen still glowing in her hand. For a full minute, she didn't breathe. Then she walked to her desk, sat down, and called Aubrey in. Aubrey appeared in the doorway seconds later, brows raised. "Something wrong, not yet," Marissa said, voice steady. "But I need you to pull everything we have on Derek's shell companies, especially the ones tied to the Atlanta development." Aubrey didn't ask why. On it, she said, already walking. Alone again, Marissa leaned back in her chair. Vanessa's voice still echoed in her ears. Soft, controlled, but layered with something she hadn't expected: regret. She didn't trust her, but she also didn't believe Vanessa would reach out without reason. Not now. Not like this, not when Derek had so much to lose. An hour later, the files were spread across her desk like puzzle pieces. Aubrey was at her side, lips pressed in a tight line. "This one," she said, pointing to a financial report. "It looks clean on the surface, but if you compare it to the vendor payouts from the Charleston remodel look." Marissa's eyes scanned the numbers. Then she saw it. Recycled invoices, duplicated project codes, funds routed through fake suppliers. It wasn't just financial misconduct. It was deliberate, layered. And if it connected back to her even faintly, it could ruin everything she'd built. She sat back slowly. "He's trying to drag me into it," she said. "He's building a narrative." Quietly, so when the SEC presses harder, he has someone else to share the blame. Aubrey looked stricken. "Can he not, if I get ahead of it?" That night, Marissa met Tony at the cafe where they'd first reconnected. He was already at a back booth sipping coffee. His brow creased as he looked through emails on his phone. She slid into the booth across from him. "I need to ask you something," she said, without preamble. He looked up instantly, concern flashing across his face. "If something happened to your reputation, if people started questioning what you'd built, who you were, how would you protect it?" Tony set his phone down. "With proof. With people who know me. With quiet strength." She nodded. Even if it meant revisiting things that hurt, he didn't blink. Especially then. She leaned forward. "Derek's pulling strings, trying to smear me, tie me to projects I haven't touched in years." Tony was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you want me to look into it? I still have friends in compliance." Marissa shook her head. "No, not yet. I need to handle this myself. I just needed to say it out loud." He studied her, then reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not alone," he said. "Even when you think you have to be." Her grip tightened slightly. "I know. But this part I need to walk through the fire first. Then I'll reach back for you." Tony didn't argue. He just nodded, thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I'll wait," he said quietly. Back at home, Marissa stood in front of the full-length mirror in her bedroom, holding a framed ultrasound in one hand. She looked at herself. And for the first time, she saw all of herself. Not just the polished version the world applauded. Not just the shattered pieces she'd swept into silence, but the woman who had faced betrayal, grief, humiliation, and still rose, still chose, still led. Her reflection didn't scare her anymore. It steadied her. She placed the ultrasound on the bedside table, then pulled out her laptop and began writing a letter. To the SEC, to her investors, to the truth, not as an accusation, but as a boundary. A line no one would ever cross again, not with her name attached. By the time she closed her laptop, the sky outside had shifted to that deep indigo just before midnight. And in her chest, the unease had quieted. Not because the storm had passed, but because she finally believed she could withstand it. The studio felt different that morning. Not quieter, not louder, just stiller, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Marissa stood by the conference room windows, staring at the horizon just past the skyline of Charlotte. Her phone sat on the table beside a sealed envelope, her official letter to the SEC. Carefully written, thoroughly reviewed, and signed last night. She hadn't sent it yet. Not because she wasn't ready, because once it was out, there was no going back. "You're thinking too loud," Celia said from behind, setting a cup of herbal tea beside her. Marissa turned slightly. "Can you hear my thoughts now?" "No. But I've seen that look on your face before. It's the one you wore before you married him." Marissa paused, surprised. "You noticed?" "Of course I did," Celia said, pulling out a chair. "You walked into that church looking like someone who'd memorized her vows but forgot her own voice." The room went quiet. Then Celia added, "This time you don't need anyone's blessing, just your own." Marissa looked down at the envelope. "I'm not afraid of him anymore," she whispered. "I'm just exhausted by how much space he still takes up in my mind." "Then shrink him," Celia said gently. "By doing what you do best, showing up with truth." That afternoon, Marissa sent the letter. 3 days passed. The SEC confirmed receipt. Aubrey updated the firm's legal protections. Her investors sent quiet, respectful notes of support. Most didn't need details. They only needed to know she was standing tall. And then, the email came. From Derek. Subject line, "This ends now." She opened it fingers steady. It wasn't threatening, just vague, defensive, framed in the language of self-preservation. He claimed innocence, claimed misunderstanding, claimed victimhood. But he hadn't expected her to send the letter, and that more than anything proved she'd done the right thing. Still, the ache was there. The ache of ever having loved a man who could turn so cold so quickly. That night, she sat on the floor of her bedroom, back against the wall baby blanket in her lap. She didn't cry. Not anymore. She just let the silence hold her. And then came the knock. Soft. Familiar. Tony. She opened the door, and for a second they just stared at each other. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. "No," she said. "But I'm getting there." He stepped inside without a word and held her. Not to fix her, just to stay close while she pieced together whatever came next. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A call from Vanessa. Marissa answered on instinct. "Thank you," Vanessa said quietly. "For what?" "For not using my name in the letter," she replied. "You could have dragged me with him." "You didn't." "I didn't do it for you," Marissa said. "I did it because some part of me still wants to believe people can learn from their mistakes." There was a pause. "I did love him," Vanessa said. "Not the version you knew, the one who whispered promises at 2 a.m. and told me he felt invisible next to you." Marissa didn't flinch. "He felt small next to me because I never asked him to be less," she said. "I just refused to be less myself." Vanessa was silent for a long moment. "Then I hope you never shrink for anyone again." I won't, Marissa replied, and ended the call. The day of the Greenleaf Project launch arrived with the kind of weather that felt like permission. Crisp skies, light breeze, early warmth in the air. Tony met her outside the studio, hands in his pockets, jacket slightly wrinkled, like he'd been up all night working. "You ready?" he asked. Marissa looked at him, at the building, at the crowd gathering just beyond the gate. "I think I was born ready," she said. He smiled. "Then let's go show them what strength looks like." The ribbon was cut. The team cheered. The city officials shook hands. And Marissa stood in the center of the dream she'd almost walked away from. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because she'd almost forgotten she could reclaim it. As the evening wrapped, she found a quiet moment alone in her office. The sun was setting, casting orange streaks across the wall. She pulled out a journal and wrote one line. "When you stop waiting for someone to rescue you, you realize you were the hero all along." She closed the book. Tomorrow would bring headlines, recognition, expansion. But tonight, she just let herself feel full, whole, and free. Marissa stood at the back of the community hall, her hands resting on the edge of the chair in front of her, watching the quiet stir of faces and whispered anticipation. The Greenleaf Foundation was officially partnering with 3 local organizations tonight, a step that once felt too far, too ambitious, too fragile. And yet here they were. Rows of women seated shoulder to shoulder, some in heels, some in sneakers, all waiting for something that felt bigger than a press release, bigger than a grant. They were waiting to see if someone like them could survive something unspoken, and still rise. Tony was standing by the refreshment table, listening to Celia recount some local board meeting drama. His laugh caught on the edge of the air and traveled to Marissa like a soft signal. She smiled, then took a slow breath and made her way toward the front of the room. As she stepped up to the microphone, the hush was immediate. She let it linger, the silence settling into a kind of trust. "I've spent the last year learning how to let go of a life I designed for someone else," she began, "and learning how to create one that makes room for who I actually am." Eyes locked on her. She kept going. "I've made mistakes. I've stayed too long in rooms that didn't hear me. I've loved people who only loved versions of me they could control. And I've doubted myself in the very moments I should have stood taller." A pause. "But what I've learned is this: when you reclaim your voice, you don't just get louder, you get clearer." Heads nodded, fists subtly clenched in solidarity. You get to rebuild, not from what broke you, but from what survived. She let the words hang, then stepped back. Applause broke gently, first like a ripple, then like a wave. And for a few seconds, Marissa didn't feel like the founder. She felt like one of them, a woman who'd walked through fire barefoot and figured out how to dance anyway. After the event, as the crowd thinned and chairs were folded, Tony joined her outside, beneath the streetlight. "You owned that," he said. "I wasn't trying to," she replied. "I was just telling the truth." He nodded slowly, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What's that? I was going to wait," he said. But tonight felt like a moment. She unfolded it. A drawing, a rough sketch of a home, open floor plan, soft lines, lots of windows, a blend of strength and grace, her design language, her fingerprint. Beneath it, in Tony's handwriting, "For whatever you build next with someone who sees it all." Her throat caught. He watched her. Steady. No pressure, just hope. "I don't know what comes next," she whispered. "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to know I'm not going anywhere." She touched the drawing again, then looked up at him. "Would you come inside? I don't want to go back to the house alone tonight." He smiled. "Yeah, Of course. They didn't rush, just walked side by side through the quiet streets, Charlotte humming gently around them, the weight of past chapters softening with every step. When they reached her front door, Marissa paused, keys in hand. She turned to Tony. "You never asked me for anything." "I didn't need to," he said. "You gave more just by showing up fully." She opened the door, letting the warm light spill out. He followed her in. Inside, the space felt different. Not haunted. Not hollow. Just new. Marissa set the drawing on her desk, glanced once at her reflection in the hall mirror, then back at Tony. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. He nodded. "I thought the worst day of my life was the night Derek kissed her in front of me. But it wasn't." She paused. "The worst day was the one after, when I realized I still wanted him to love me." Tony stepped closer. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, voice shaking just slightly, "I want to love myself more than I ever loved the idea of being chosen." He didn't say anything, just reached for her hand. And this time, when she let him hold it, it didn't feel like rescue. It felt like return. The house echoed differently now. Marissa stood in the center of the great room, the one she had once obsessed over, with mood boards, swatches, and Pinterest folders that bloomed with hope. Light streamed through the tall windows, falling across the empty floor like a final breath before goodbye. She'd sold it. Papers signed. Keys handed over. The house that held the blueprint of her past would soon belong to someone else. She wasn't sad. She was still. Like something deep inside had clicked into place. The front door opened softly behind her. Tony. He stepped in holding a small brown envelope. "You ready?" he asked. Marissa smiled faintly. "I think so." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a single brass key. Heavy, engraved with a small M. "It's to the new space," he said. "The one we talked about outside the cafe." Her fingers closed around it. "Is it done?" "Not yet," he said. "But it's waiting." She nodded, the silence between them full of soft electricity. Marissa turned once more to face the room. Every inch held a memory, some beautiful, some brutal. But none of them held her anymore, not like they used to. She walked slowly toward the nursery. The walls were still a pale eucalyptus, the rocking chair still there, though she had moved most of the other pieces already. She sank into the chair and let her hands rest over her belly, cradling the life still growing. "Can I have a moment alone?" she asked Tony. He nodded and slipped out, closing the door behind him. She took a breath, then spoke. "I don't know what you'll remember about me," she said quietly to the baby. "But I hope it's this: I never stayed quiet when it mattered. Not in the end." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I stayed too long in a place that didn't see me. I gave the best parts of myself to a version of love that couldn't hold me. But I left when it counted. I left with grace, with dignity, and with a plan." She paused, the air thick and warm. "I sold the house because I built it with someone who couldn't grow with me. But I'll build another. Not just for us, but with us in mind. One where love doesn't ask me to vanish." She stood, pressing a kiss to her fingertips, then touched them to the crib. It would be the last time. That evening, she and Tony drove to the new lot just outside the city, on a quiet stretch of land bordered by pines and goldenrod. The sun was low orange and wide, casting long shadows that looked like beginnings. The foundation had been poured. The frame would go up next week. Marissa stepped out of the car and stood in the center of it all. Bare ground, open sky, no walls, no echoes of past heartbreak. Just space. Tony joined her hands in his pockets. You thinking what I'm thinking? He asked. I'm thinking this is the first place I've ever stood that didn't ask me to shrink, she said. He smiled. Then let's make it a home. They didn't kiss. Not yet. There was something even more intimate than romance in that moment. There was partnership. A week later, Marissa stood in front of a small audience again, this time at a charity gala hosted by the foundation. The theme was Design Your Legacy. She wore ivory, simple, soft, powerful, and when she took the mic, her voice didn't shake. Every woman I know has had to rebuild herself at least once she began, sometimes quietly, sometimes without applause, sometimes after loving someone who mistook their silence for strength. She let that settle. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm not interested in making anyone small to feel tall. What I care about, what I care deeply about, is building spaces, families, and futures where respect isn't a luxury. It's the bare minimum. Applause followed, gentle and real. She stepped down. Celia was waiting with a tissue just in case. Aubrey grinned and whispered, "Mic drop." And Tony? He was in the back, hands in his pockets, smiling like he knew what came next wasn't just a chapter. It was the next book. That night at home, her temporary condo small but warm, Marissa curled up on the couch and opened the letter her grandmother had written her years ago, the one she'd found again while packing. It read, "Baby girl, if love ever makes you smaller, it isn't love. Build where you're seen. Stay where you're safe. And when it's time to go, go beautifully." Marissa folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. Then she leaned back, smiled to herself, and whispered, "I went beautifully." And this time, she believed it. Every word, every step. She had sold the house. She had ended the marriage. But more than that, she had come home to herself.